Waitress fired for serving the bikers. What happened next changed her life forever. Before dive, and please subscribe to channel. The lunch rush had just ended, and the small roadside diner finally breathed again. Plates clattered in the sink. Silverware jingled, and the low hum of conversations faded into a calm silence. Outside, sunlight poured through the wide glass windows, streaking across the cracked red-leather booths, making the dust specks swirl like tiny stars in the golden air. It should have been an ordinary afternoon. But for Emily Carter, a hard-working single mother with tired eyes and a hopeful smile, this was the day her life would change forever. She didn't know it yet, but in the span of a few minutes, one decision would cost her everything, then return her more than she had ever dreamed possible. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story of kindness, sacrifice, and second chances, take a moment to remember that compassion is powerful. Every small act can ripple outward in ways we may never see. The diner wasn't fancy. Its floors were scuffed and worn from decades of footsteps. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, one letter always threatening to burn out. The booths were patched with tape, and the smell of strong coffee clung to the air. But for Emily, this wasn't just a diner. It was survival. After her husband had abandoned her years ago, Emily carried the weight of raising her 10-year-old son, Daniel, alone. Every tip meant food on the table. Every paycheck meant keeping the lights on. Every smile she forced across her face was another shield against despair. Her co-workers often whispered that she was too soft, too gentle in a world that demanded toughness. But Emily believed kindness was not weakness. It was survival. It was what she wanted to pass on to her boy. That day, Emily tied her apron tighter and wiped her damp palms against the faded fabric. She didn't know it yet, but fate had parked itself outside in the roar of heavy engines. The bell above the door jingled, and in walked a group that drew every eye in the room. Leather jackets, heavy boots, tattoos that told stories of roads traveled and battles fought. Their voices were deep, their presence heavy. They were the kind of men who looked like they'd seen everything and lost nothing. The Iron Serpent's motorcycle club had arrived. The air shifted instantly. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A nervous hush fell over the diner. A man at the counter muttered under his breath, "Don't serve them." Another customer grabbed his coat, tossed a few bills on the table, and hurried out. Even the cook, visible through the kitchen window, paused mid-motion, spatula frozen in the air. Behind the counter, the manager, Mr. Havers, stiffened. His jaw worked as if he were chewing gravel. "We don't need their kind here," he grumbled under his breath. Emily felt her heartbeat quicken. She'd heard the rumors, the brawls, the headlines, the whispered warnings. Yet as she glanced at them, she saw something no one else seemed to notice. They weren't sneering or starting trouble. They were simply tired men, dusty from the road, looking for food. One of them, older and stiff, struggled to sit, and another quietly adjusted his chair for him. It wasn't menace Emily saw. It was weariness. Humanity. While the rest of the staff froze in fear, Emily did what she always did. She chose kindness. Emily picked up her notepad, straightened her shoulders, and walked over to their table. Her hands trembled, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "What can I get you all today?" she asked softly. To her surprise, the bikers didn't bark orders or make crude remarks. They said please and thank you. One joked that he hadn't had pie that looked as good as the one in the display case since his grandmother baked. Another grinned when Emily refilled his coffee before he even asked. They weren't monsters. They were just men on the road. Emily treated them like she treated everyone, with patience, with warmth, with respect. She slipped extra bread on the table without charging, and when she poured their coffee, she smiled. And for the first time in years, a spark of gratitude softened the bikers' rough faces. But not everyone was happy. From behind the counter, Mr. Havers' face turned red, his lips pressed in a tight line. He pulled Emily aside, his grip sharp on her arm. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Do you know who they are? You'll drive away the rest of my customers. This diner has a reputation to protect." Emily swallowed hard. "They're polite. They're paying customers. They deserve to be treated like anyone else." But Havers didn't care. His fear was louder than reason. By the time the bikers left, placing a hefty tip on the table that stunned even Emily. Her fate was already sealed. That night, after the last plates were washed and the chairs flipped onto tables, Havers handed her a thin envelope. "You're done here," he said coldly. "I can't have someone disobeying orders and putting this place at risk. You're fired." Emily stood frozen. Fired for being kind. Fired for doing her job. Her voice cracked. "Please, I need this job. My son." But Havers turned away. His mind was made up. The walk back to her small apartment was heavy. Each step echoed with a question. Did I do the right thing? By the time she pushed open the creaky front door, her chest ached. Daniel was at the kitchen table, bent over his homework. He looked up with a bright smile. "Hey, Mom, you're home. Did you bring pie?" Emily swallowed hard, forcing a smile. She made him cereal with the last of the milk, pretending nothing was wrong. She couldn't bear to see his face fall. But when he was asleep, she sat at the edge of her bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she would keep the lights on. Fear clawed at her ribs. The next morning, Emily woke with swollen eyes but put on a brave face. She kissed Daniel's forehead and told him she'd figure things out. But inside, she had no answers. Around midday, the low, unmistakable rumble of engines shook the street. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Children pressed noses to windows. Emily stepped onto her porch, her heart pounding. Down the street, stretching farther than she could see, were motorcycles. Chrome gleamed in the daylight. Leather jackets glistened in the sun. At the front stood the same group of men she had served the day before. For a moment, fear flickered in her chest. Why were they here? Then one of them stepped forward, holding a bouquet of wildflowers. Another carried grocery bags filled to the brim. And at the front, their leader, a tall man with weathered features named Ryder, spoke in a voice both strong and unexpectedly gentle. "We heard what happened," Ryder said, his deep voice carrying down the street. "That you lost your job for serving us a meal. That ain't right. Kindness should never cost you everything." Emily's breath caught. Her neighbors stood stunned as, one by one, the bikers began unloading gifts, bags of fresh vegetables, meat, canned goods, even a box of school supplies for Daniel. Then Ryder handed her an envelope. Inside was more cash than Emily had made in months. Her hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Ryder met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Because yesterday you saw us as men, not monsters. You gave us respect when no one else would. That kind of heart deserves to be protected." Word spread quickly, first to the neighborhood, then across the town, then across the state. Waitress fired for serving bikers. Bikers come back to save her. News outlets picked up the story. Reporters knocked on her door. Strangers reached out, offering donations, encouragement, even job opportunities. Emily, who had once stood in fear of losing everything, suddenly found herself surrounded by more support than she could have imagined. She eventually accepted a position at a small family-owned cafe. Unlike her old job, here her kindness was celebrated, not punished. Customers came not just for the food, but to meet the woman who had dared to serve the dangerous bikers with a smile. And every night, when she tucked Daniel into bed, she told him the lesson she had learned. No matter what the world says, kindness is never wasted. Sometimes it just takes time for it to come back to you. Emily Carter's story became a living reminder that compassion carries power. The iron serpents didn't just give her food and money. They gave her dignity back. And in turn, Emily gave the world a lesson that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is be unkind, and the bravest thing you can do is be kind anyway.